a small step in a bridge way towards what we all would like to see but are unable to accomplish right now, which is overall tax reform. I yield back.
I thank the gentleman, and he is correct. We do have a very substantial difference of opinion. The indication is this is a start. Frankly, we were told it was a start in 2001. We were told it was a start in 2003 when we cut revenues very substantially. Unfortunately, we didn't cut revenues very substantially. And when you don't cut revenues after you cut taxes, what happens is you have deficits. And that's why we went from a $5.6 trillion projected surplus after the Clinton administration, projected by the Bush administration, to an $11 trillion deficit at the end of the Bush administration, because we cut revenues and we increased spending. We were not in charge for 75% of that time. In fact, we weren't in charge of passing ultimate legislation any of that time, because the President, of course, had an 8-year term. So I say to my friend, we dug another $46 billion hole. My belief is that your side of the aisle will not want to reinstate that tax next year, no matter what the economy is doing, no matter how good the economy is. That's my suspicion. But it's based upon 30 years of experience, I tell my friend. And if that's the case, then we're not talking about $46 billion. We're talking about $500 billion, which is $46 billion times 10 with escalation for inflation. So about $500 billion additional hole in the deficit, unless the gentleman is prepared to say, look, if the economy recovers, we're going to reinstate that revenue. The difference between us is you want to talk about tax increases. I want to talk about paying our bills. And I believe that if we don't want to buy, then we don't have to tax. But if we buy, we have a moral responsibility to have the courage to ask people to pay for it. And very frankly, I think you've taken the discipline out of the system. I think supply-side economics takes the discipline out of the system. What supply-side economics says, we can cut revenues, but don't have to cut spending, because magically we're going to get more revenues. Now, very frankly, Mr. Greenspan thought for a while that that worked. He said 3 years ago, no, he was wrong. I think he was right the second time. He was demonstrably, graphically not right the first time when he rationalized the 2001 and 2003. We cut revenues. They did not raise sufficient additional dollars and growth in the economy. As a matter of fact, whether there was a direct result, we had the worst economy I've experienced in my adult lifetime at the end of the Bush term and at the beginning of the Obama term, as responsibility for the economy went over to President Obama. Now, there's a lot of debate during this bill about how we'd lost jobs. That's true. Those jobs were lost in the early part of the Obama administration. As the gentleman knows, over the last 24 months, we've had 4 million new jobs created, 10 quarters of economic growth in our country, and the Dow has doubled. The Dow has doubled since March of '09. It's hard for me to see how that was a failure. It certainly hasn't been the success we'd like, but not a failure. And I tell my friend that, yes, we have a difference, and the public needs to come to grips with that difference in that debate, and that is whether or not we're going to pay for things we buy. And if we don't want to buy them, we won't have to pay for them, we cut taxes. Unless the gentleman wants to say something further, I'll yield back the balance of my time.
Mr. Speaker, it's very tempting, but I'm going to yield back to the gentleman.
Tempted though he is, I will yield back my time as well.
The gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from Arkansas seek recognition? Gentleman from Arkansas will suspend. For what purpose does the gentleman from Virginia seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that when the House adjourns today, to adjourn to meet at 11 a.m. on Monday next.
Without objection. Gentleman from Arkansas is recognized for 1 minute.
Scandal is a prime example of why Americans have lost faith in their government. This week I questioned GSA officials about the now infamous conference hosted in Las Vegas. This one lavish conference left American taxpayers with an $822,000 tab. Let me list just a few of the items, expense items from Las Vegas that are sure to enrage the American taxpayers. $75,000 was spent on a bicycle building exercise to encourage team building. $3,200 was spent on mind readers to entertain the attendees. Guess what I'm thinking now? The average cost for breakfast per attendee, $44. That's $44 per person per day. And I say the worst for last, a $30,000 pool party. Adding insult to injury, the chief organizer of the 2010 Las Vegas GSA conference was approved for a bonus by senior Obama officials for his work in organizing the conference. Officials who organize and authorize wasteful spending must be held responsible. This body must work to end the culture of waste at GSA and other government agencies and ensure that taxpayer dollars are respected. Yield back.
Gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from California seek recognition? Gentleman's recognized without objection.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I rise today in honor of the National Day of Silence, which is tomorrow. This is the 15th year we've commemorated the National Day of Silence, a time when students across the country remain silent for a whole day to draw attention to discrimination towards LGBT peers. Lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, questioning youth and their allies face verbal and physical bullying on a daily basis just for being who they are. In a time when these teens are at greater risk of suicide and self-harm, we cannot afford to be silent. I'm proud to say that in my district, queer youth and allies work together to make life better. Many of our middle schools and high schools in my district host student-run gay-straight alliances, which create a supportive space so that queer youth do not feel isolated. I'm proud of my constituents for calling for a stop in harassment of GLBT individuals, and I encourage all Americans to do the same. I'm particularly proud of two high school seniors in my district, Joaquin Garcia and Lucia Walters. I'll enter their stories in the record. Congress must not be silent.
Gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from Pennsylvania seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, request unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute, revise and extend.
Without objection, gentleman's recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, over the past 2 decades, our nation's small businesses have generated 65% of new jobs. According to a recent small business survey from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, today 64% of small businesses stand idle at current staffing levels, with 52% not hiring because they aren't confident in our nation's recovery, and another 33% pointing to uncertainty driven by Washington. These concerns are justifiable, Mr. Speaker, with the Senate continually choosing to ignore our jobs crisis in favor of advancing an agenda that will only grow government, not our economy. Their latest proposal surely wasn't about economic growth, for it takes private investment away from small businesses and turns it over to bureaucracies. It wasn't even about fairness, for it is fair to no one, not to the wealthy who pay even more taxes instead of investing in our economy, and not to the rest of us who need jobs, growth, and greater opportunity. With economic uncertainty still pervasive, every decision made by government must pass a simple test of whether or not it aids the nation's recovery. Senate Democrats either fail to understand our economic problems or have, as troubling as it is, may be, chosen to ignore them.
Gentleman's time has expired. For what purpose does the gentleman from Tennessee seek recognition?
The House for 1 minute, revise and extend.
Without objection, gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you. Ask unanimous consent. All members may have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks on the topic of my 1 minute. Today, thank you, sir. Today it was a Yom HaShoah service held in the state capitol, the United States Capitol, and they were held in state capitals throughout the nation. It's the remembrance of the Holocaust that occurred in Europe. 6 million lives were lost. And what the Yom HaShoah program's about is never to forget the Holocaust and never to forget what caused it to occur. To remember the outstanding military and people that helped Jews survive, the military that liberated the camps, and the hundreds of thousands of righteous Gentiles who helped and risked their own lives to save Jews. I wear a button for Raoul Wallenberg, for the Swedish government sent people over here, and he was a diplomat that saved 100,000 Jews, and they participated today. There was testimony about how Treasury Secretary Morgenthau and 2 people in his administration, Mr. Paley and Mr. Dubois, implored the President to help rescue Jews, and they did so. Many, many, many were lost because we didn't get involved soon enough. Never be silent to evil. and remember the victims of the Holocaust, I urge you to visit the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum. I yield back the balance of my time.
Time's expired, gentlemen. For what purpose the gentleman from Maryland seek recognition?
Address the House for 1 minute, revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, Baltimore, Maryland was the site of the first blood shed in our Civil War on April 19, 1861. The next year, on September 17, 1862, the bloodiest one-day military battle in America's history took place on farms along Antietam Creek near the small town of Sharpsburg in Washington County, Maryland. The 24th Antietam National Battlefield Millennial Illumination will take place on Saturday, December 1, 2012. At twilight, 23,110 luminaries prepared by 1,400 volunteers will be lit, one for each soldier who fell there. 20,000 people personally witnessed 23,110 individual lights, not divided into camps, one Union, the other Confederate, but one unbroken formation across peaceful, rolling farmland on a silent winter night. The first illumination in 1988 was spearheaded by Georgene Charles, the event's founder, who continues each year to coordinate this monumental effort. Local Girl and Boy Scouts, the Hagerstown, Washington County Convention and Visitors Bureau, and others take pride in preparing North America's largest memorial illumination. I highly recommend that you make time to attend the 24th illumination on December 1, 2012. It powerfully reminds us of the true cost of war and the sacrifices of generations of the members of our military and their families. It's a truly moving event. Please come.
Gentleman's time has expired. For what purpose the gentleman from Indiana seek recognition?
I rise to address the House for 1 minute and to revise and extend remarks.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to commend a publication that has played a central role in shaping the ideas that have powered the conservative movement for decades. Launched in 1944, Human Events is the nation's oldest conservative news weekly. In 1961, a rising star by the name of Ronald Reagan began reading Human Events. He enjoyed it so much that throughout his presidency, he would receive the very first issue each week, hot off the presses. And back in 1992, I was honored to serve as an intern for Human Events, where I worked closely with political editor John Gizzi, whom I consider a good friend. This week, Human Events relaunched its print edition with a new format and expanded Washington coverage. Conservatives have long depended upon Human Events to carry out its mission, which is to analyze events through the eyes that favor limited constitutional government, local self-government, free enterprise, and individual freedom. That is a mission I wholeheartedly support, and I commend Human Events to you, Mr. Speaker, and to this entire body, and I yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired. For what purpose does the gentleman from California seek recognition?
Consent to address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, the House just passed H.R. 9, purporting to give a temporary tax cut to small businesses. I say purporting because it doesn't cut spending at the same time, and thus it merely shifts current taxes into the future. Once a dollar's been spent, it's already become a tax, taken either from today or from tomorrow to pay off deficits. Nor does H.R. 9 do much to promote economic growth because it does little to reward new productivity at the margin. At best, it produces a one-year sugar high until the bills come due. Tax cuts without either spending reductions or real economic growth are an illusion. Real tax reform would permanently reduce the marginal tax rate for all businesses and cut government spending concurrently. This would encourage and reward growth, shift investment decisions from politicians to entrepreneurs, and not rob our economy of its future. I hope before the end of this session that we will do so.
Gentleman's time has expired. Are there any any further 1 minute requests? The chair lays before the House the following personal request.
Leave of absence requested for Mr. Bass of New Hampshire for today.
Without objection, the request is granted. Under the Speaker's announced policy of January 5, 2011, the gentleman from Minnesota, Mr. Ellison, is recognized for 60 minutes as the designee of the Minority Leader.
I want to thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the time. My name is Keith Ellison, and we'll claim the time on behalf of the Progressive Caucus. This is the Progressive Caucus's moment where we come together and talk about our ideals, our values, the things that are critically important, we believe, to all Americans. And this week, I'm joined by two outstanding leaders in the Progressive Caucus and in the Congress and in America, Hank Johnson of Georgia and Lynn Woolsey of California. I want to invite both my colleagues to jump in as they feel inspired to do so. But let me just set the groundwork a little bit. This week, we saw a number of things occur. And one of the things that we saw this week is the Buffett rule that was taken up in the Senate. The Senate voted on the Buffett rule and a policy that requires millionaires and billionaires to pay the same tax rates as middle-class families and working people. And I want to make it clear, we don't begrudge anybody for doing well, but we do believe that in a country as great as America, if you have been privileged enough to do well, that maybe you should do something for America. And this wildly popular measure was filibustered and therefore defeated in the Senate. According to the CNN International poll, nearly 3/4 of Americans support the Buffett rule and believe it should be law. And despite this, Republicans in the Senate blocked the bill from even getting a majority vote. I mention this particular situation this way as I begin our dialogue that we'll have tonight over the course of this hour, because I think that it is emblematic of the problem that we're facing today. We're going to talk tonight about Citizens United. We'll talk about a lot of things, but one of the things that I think is emblematic of the problem we're facing here in the U.S. Congress today is that what the overwhelming majority of Americans want, the overwhelming majority of Americans don't get. Something like the Buffett rule. And the reason why is the pernicious and corrosive effect of money in politics today. So we are the Progressive Caucus. We're honored to be before the American people today, Mr. Speaker. And we are the caucus who, yes, will stand up for civil and human rights for all people without regard to your color, your culture, your sex, your gender, your sexual preference, your religion, wherever you were born, national origin. We believe that all Americans are value and believe in liberty and justice for all. Yes, the Progressive Caucus is the caucus that's going to say that, you know, if you work hard every day and you ought to be able to make enough money to feed your family in America. And yes, we believe that if you've been able to be in this great country of ours and do well in this environment, you ought to do something. You ought to pay taxes, enough taxes, so that the needs and the costs of our society can be paid for. And absolutely, we believe we have a duty and obligation, responsibility to the environment and our natural world. Now, we're not ashamed to stand up for these values: peace, working class prosperity and fairness, environmental sustainability, and civil and human rights for all people. We care about these things, and we're going to. But today, we're going to discuss a number of issues, including the Buffett rule, Citizens United, ALEC, the budget, the Ryan budget, and a whole range of issues. So at this point, I'm going to hand it over to my colleague and friend, Lynn Woolsey of California.
I'd like to thank the chairman of the Progressive Caucus for bringing this together today and to talk about what's so important to the people of the United States of America, our country, and in turn the world. I want to say a few things about the Buffett rule. And because just to fill out that discussion, there's some things we know. The Buffett rule is fiscally responsible. According to the Joint Committee on Taxation, the Buffett rule could reduce the deficit by anywhere from $47 billion to $162 billion over the next decade. The Buffett rule is widely supported, as the chairman just said. The Buffett rule would restore the principal fairness of the tax code because it ensures that millionaires can't game the system to pay a lower rate than middle-class families. Overwhelmingly, majorities of Americans across the political spectrum believe millionaires should pay their fair share. An overwhelming 76% of Americans support increasing the taxes paid by people who make more than $1 million per year, which includes 75% of independents and 56% of Republicans. The majority of millionaires themselves support the Buffett rule. In a recent poll of millionaires, an overwhelming 68% support the Buffett rule. Millionaires support the Buffett rule. And remember, it's taxation above $1 million, and it's stepped up. It isn't the minute you hit $1 million, you're taxed at a much greater rate. It's that from $1 million up, the taxes will go up. 7,000 millionaires paid no individual income taxes in the year 2011. 70,000 millionaires didn't pay any personal taxes in 2011. According to the Tax Policy Center, 7,000 millionaires, that tax center that told us that. Republican budget would shower even more tax breaks on millionaires while putting more of the burden on the middle-class families. While Democrats are fighting to restore fairness in the tax code, the Republican budget offers extreme right-wing alternatives, that's my opinion, that would shower millionaires and billionaires with tax breaks at the expense of the middle class. And that would further skew the system in favor of the wealthiest Americans. So we've got a lot of statistics. We know the facts. We're ready to support the Buffett rule. Millionaires themselves support it. So the question is, why can't we get the people we work with in the U.S. Congress to support the Buffett rule?
Well, you know, much of it has to do with the fact that we have a disproportionate percentage of wealthy interests. You know, the fact is you got money coming in, lobbyists paid for, campaign donations, all this stuff, and now we got the onset of the super PAC, and we have the Citizens United decision. And if you ask yourself, why can't we pass the budget rule? Why can't we pass a public option, which is wildly popular? Why can't we get environmental regulations? We need to protect our lungs and our health and our earth. Why can't we do these things? And the reason why is because the disproportionate corrosive effect of money in our government. And this is why, earlier this week, we were able to pass something, a Declaration for Democracy, which reads, I declare my support for amending the Constitution of the United States to restore the rights of people undermined by Citizens United in related cases, to protect the integrity of our elections and limit the corrosive influence of money on the democratic process. We have a lot of people who signed this particular document, but not just members of Congress signed it. Some people who signed it were city council members, were community citizen activists. There were people from a broad cross-section of American life, because they asked the same question you asked, Congressman Woolsey. Why can't we pass the Buffett rule? Why can't we pass environmental protections? Why can't we pass the public option? Why can't things that Americans want get through? The reason they can't get through is because you got the lobbyists money being poured in, you got campaign donations here, you're about to see a whole plethora of ugly, nasty, divisive, corrosive attack ads in this upcoming presidential election. And that the bottom line is, if we get this money out, what will happen is that citizens' voices will emerge past the money. Citizens' voices will come up, and citizens will have their will reflected in the Congress more so. It was an awesome lift to pick up health care, and we didn't even get all the things we wanted in there, but we got a lot of the things we wanted. But why didn't we get all the things we wanted, even though they were popular? The corrosive, divisive effect of money. I think the healthcare industry was putting in like $14 million a day to lobby against the Affordable Care Act. And of course, you know, with all that kind of pushing and shoving and cajoling, it just gets incredibly difficult. So I want to yield back to the gentleman from Georgia, who has some important information about a number of things. But I think
first like to address, Congressman, the issue of taxes and fair taxes. On yesterday, or actually day before yesterday, I stood with a group of fair taxers, people who are recommending the fair tax as an alternative to our current system. And I stood with them and I spoke to them, told them that I was not there to endorse the fair tax. I was there to tell them that I believed that it was something that Congress should definitely study. We shouldn't just put it aside. There's no doubt that we need fundamental tax reform in this country, and the fair tax is a vehicle to open the door for Congress to start reviewing other possibilities, including the fair tax, as a way of fixing our inherently unequal tax code. And our policies, if we can't pass the Buffett rule, which simply says that a millionaire would not pay a less effective rate than working people, and so in other words, the maids and the butlers and the everyone else who, secretary, the police cops who patrol the area, the security guards that control the estate of these rich folks, the firefighters, ambulances will come pick them up. They don't pay the same tax rates as those people. And 70,000 of the millionaires in the country didn't pay a dime in income tax. And enjoying all of those benefits, police, fire, is truly amazing to me that we are still not at the point in this country where we are willing to consider redoing our complicated and our complicated tax code. Is just ridiculous that it's not working, and we can't even pass a bill in this Congress which mandates that common people pay at a regular, at a rate that is not in excess of those that the millionaires enjoy. That's just an issue of fairness. It's not fair, it's not right. And I would suggest to you, Congressman and Congresswoman, that perhaps the reason why we're seeing this kind of favorable treatment afforded to millionaires by this Congress is because almost half of the incoming freshmen, I understand, are millionaires. I think the figure is about 43%. And if someone can correct me on that, I stand corrected. But my information is 43% of the Tea Party freshmen are millionaires, and so they benefit from these laws, these trickle-down economics laws, and they've been enjoying them since 1980. That's when voodoo economics, as George Herbert Walker Bush called it, trickle-down economics, voodoo economics, or whatever you want to call it, it has not worked. And but we still have proposals today to make it work, and it's evidenced by what we did today with a $46 billion tax cut for what's called small businesses, but actually a small business with 500 employees We only have about 1,000 businesses in the country with 1,000 or more employees. So we're actually talking about big business when we talk about 500 employees. It's a one-time, one-year, $46 billion tax cut that they get, according to this legislation that we passed today, and it's totally unpaid for. And with that, Congressman, I'd like to yield to, if I may.
California, Ms. Lynn Wilsey.
And I want to add a few more things about the Buffett rule, because there's so much to talk about that I'm sure that our C-SPAN viewers and probably most of the members of Congress really don't realize. The 400 highest earning Americans in 2008 who made an average each of $271 million. So, okay, 400 individuals averaged $271 million, paid an average effective federal tax rate of just 18.1%. At the same time, a married couple earning $70,000 a year paid a rate of 25%. Is that just unbelievable?
Amazing.
The Buffett rule seeks to restore balance to families so that the tax code would make sure that no millionaire would pay a lower tax rate than middle-class Americans. In fact, the Buffett rule is targeted. The legislation will only impact taxpayers with a taxable income over $1 million who are not paying a minimum tax rate of 30%. So realize that. So of the 144 million tax returns filed in 2010, less than 500,000 of them, 0.1% of the taxpayers had taxable incomes over $1 million. Remember, taxable incomes, because there's lots of write-offs. So,
well, if the gentlelady would yield. So my question is, that the people who have the kind of money you just described are actually a small part of the population.
I know.
But I think they're punching above their weight because they have inordinate influence in the political process.
You're right, they have an influence in the political process, and average working Americans don't realize that that's not them. The family that earns $70,000 in taxable income or earns $70,000 a year is taxed on that at a rate of 25%.
If the gentlelady would yield, so if you're making $70K a year, paying 25% of your income in income taxes, I mean, that means that if there is an increase in your property taxes, you're really going to feel that.
Oh, boy.
That's going to punch you right in the stomach. Right. That's going to make a difference in whether the kids can get braces or not. That's going to make a difference as to whether or not you can put a roof on the house. It'll make a huge difference. 70,000 is actually doing pretty well, but small variations can change your life. If you're making 70,000, if you're a two-income household making 70,000, and if one of the partners to the relationship gets sick or dies, that means catastrophic expenses on the family, because if you're spending, you know, at a 70,000 a year level and you lose a household member, then you got all those bills with just the one person, and then you're going to be in bankruptcy. This is why we know 56% of all bankruptcy filings are driven by medical debt. This is how this happens, even to middle-class people. But the Buffett rule and putting Americans to work and doing a lot of things is really, the Progressive Caucus is all about addressing these systemic problems we're talking about today. So I just want to let everybody know, if you want to check out what the Progressive Caucus says about the budget rule, you should know that we have the budget rule contained in our budget. We put America back to work by front-loading jobs in our budget. We invest in America's future by investing in infrastructure, and we reduce the deficit, in part by asking the wealthiest, most privileged Americans to do the patriotic thing and pony up a little bit more to help America. So I yield to the gentleman from Georgia.
Thank you, Congressman. And it's disturbing to me that with all that the Congressional Progressive Caucus has done to try to level the playing field in this country for working men and women, that we would all be lumped together and called names. And I wanted you to comment about one of our colleagues who, in response to a question asked of him, quote, how many communists are there in the United States Congress? And this congressman stepped up to the mic and in a calm and polite manner, thoughtful looking, a pensive look on his face, and he said, I believe that there are between 78 and 81 members of the Communist Party who are members of Congress. Now, can you respond to that, Congressman?
You know what? I have to say that I'm not. I have to demur and say that I'm not that excited to respond. I responded on Ed Schultz. I responded on Wolf Blitzer. I responded on Martin Bashir, and I've just said it's not true. It's a false statement. It is untrue. It's unfair. It's unkind. It raises the level of vitriol and insult in this body. And of course, it's tough enough around here already. We don't need to hurl false accusation against each other. I would just urge the public to remind members of Congress that we need to have a little bit more civility around here. And if you do want to make an ugly comment or a negative comment about your colleagues, at least try to make it somewhere within 10,000 miles of being true. This is absolutely false.
Well,
and
gentleman,
I yield back.
Well, sir, the next day a statement was released by the gentleman, and the statement was to the effect that the entire membership of the Congressional Progressive Caucus are members of are card-carrying members of the Communist Party. And I just think that it's important that we say that, first of all, that's not true.
We're saying it.
And secondly, that it has no place in the rational dialogue and the honest dialogue that we seek to have here amongst us, both sides of the aisle.
But if I ask the gentleman to yield, one thing I don't want to do, and I'm just speaking for me, if he calls us names, I'm not going to call him names.
No, me either.
He calls us names, I'm not going to call them ugly names like that. There's a lot of ugly names that you could call someone who has a right-wing perspective on the extreme. We don't engage in tit-for-tat because that's childlike. We're adults. We're here to discharge a responsibility on behalf of the American people. We swore an oath to uphold and defend the U.S. Constitution, and that is what I'm going to do. I'm not going to be distracted by somebody who is not clear on what we're supposed to be doing here. I'm going to stay focused on what we're here to do.
And I'd like to say that by caring about American workers, by caring about women and children, by caring about our seniors, by wanting to put food on the table of all Americans and help them with clean air, good food, clean water. If that labels us, so be it. And all that says to me is somebody is very frightened about the good things we do. And I think we should move on now to Citizens United, who...
Well, Congresswoman, I agree, but I also want to point out that to label folks as communists and socialists just because they believe in fairness for the working people of this country is not true, and I think that it should be called out, because if it's left unaddressed, then some folks will think it's true. But with that, I would like to I certainly would love for us to get into a discussion about Citizens United, Congresswoman.
Well, thank you. I believe that it's ever more important that we do something about the Supreme Court's decision in Citizens United versus FEC, which overturns nearly 100 years of campaign finance laws in this country that limits corporations' involvement in political campaigns. And in so doing, gives big business a much louder voice. Yes. Yes.
Speakers announce policy. The gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Johnson, will control the remainder of the hour as the designee of the minority leader.
Oh.
Gentleman from California.
All right. Thank you very much. Anyway, in that action by the Supreme Court, big business was given a louder voice than the individual in this country. And if we want to protect our democracy, that's what we have to bring an end to. All that money coming into the political system without transparency and making the average citizen feel like their voice means nothing.
Congresswoman, I believe that you have hit the nail on the head. This Citizens United ruling by the United States Supreme Court definitely puts corporations in a position of superiority over just the regular working people of this country. And the reason why is because corporations have now been afforded the same rights that individuals have to speak freely and with no regulation.
Right.
And Congress refuses to even consider any regulations on that speech for purposes of campaigning and affecting the outcome of campaigns. And so this is a decision that is devastating to the people of this country, the working people of this country, the people who don't have a voice like the U.S. Chamber of Commerce or like some unknown super PAC that is formed on the eve of an election, funded anonymously and used to affect an election and used in such a way that you can't even mount a response to it because the cascade of money is in that PAC, and you have the slightest ability to raise the requisite amount of money to match it. And so they control the outcome of these elections with the money, and that is a devastating blow to our democracy.
And you know, Hank, the entire time I've been in the Congress, I mean, I've been here for 20 years now, and we've had Republican majority, we've had Democrat majority, but when the Republicans have been in the majority, they use as part of their mantra that they're returning government to the people. Well, excuse me, Citizens United takes government away from the people. And I don't hear them trying to change that. The other side of the aisle, the party in the majority right now, seem to be defending Citizens United. And the other thing they're doing at this moment is they're trying to upend the presidential campaign finance system. They want to drown out the voice of the people and give more power to the well-heeled special interests in the presidential elections as well. And those elections go quite well with public financing. People choose on their tax form whether or not they want to give to the presidential elections.
Well, Congresswoman, that was something that has happened this year that perhaps not a lot of people know about, is that under this Republican-controlled 112th Congress, the House has voted to do away with or abolish the I believe it's a $1 checkoff that on a tax form that you send in, you can check the box and it'll automatically deduct $1 from the amount that you owe or the amount of whatever refund you're entitled to. And that $1 then goes into a pot to be distributed among the candidates who apply for this funding. And so everything that had been put in place to try to make everything equal, along with giving people their rights to invest to a certain amount in campaign-related donations. Everything is being dismantled systematically, and it certainly does not help the people on our side of the aisle, the Democratic side of the aisle, who traditionally have depended on workers' unions, labor organizations, to be the deep pockets for our campaign contributions. And right now, I had a visit from one of my good friends in labor the other day back in my district, and this gentleman has grown to be a friend of mine, a good friend, and he's a good man. But he came to the office. He's a full-time union worker, works for the union, the administrative part of the union, not just represented by the union. And he told me with all of the people in the union who are out of work today, and we've got a few jobs in the Atlanta area that are near completion. And after completion, those workers, even those workers who are able to work, won't have any more work. And then there's nothing else on the agenda that these people can go and get jobs at. And he said it's gotten so bad with the attacks on labor, the unemployment, to where the workers represented by the union can't pay the dues, and then the monies having been drawn down by the unions to take care of the workers, to assist them during this extended period of unemployment, are on the decline and almost exhausted. And after telling me that, he said that, and so today is my last day employed at the union because they had to let me go. And we both sat there and we cried. We cried. And it was really touching because that gentleman is in the same boat that many other workers are in. And then the union, which represents those workers, is suffering greatly. They won't be able to do what they have done in the past for campaigns. But these super PACs and wealthy individuals who fund them anonymously much of the time can afford to put millions in, and so and billions in, actually. And so this is a very serious situation that we face in this country. Who's going to win? Is it money or is it the people?
Well, and Congressman, the one beacon of light in the system is the public financing of presidential campaigns. And I have to remind everybody that's voluntary. People volunteer $1 a year out of their tax return to support the public financing of the presidential races. They have to opt to do that. They don't have to. It's served our country well, and it's a very limited expense. It needs updating. It doesn't need dismantling. I mean, we need more public financing of our federal elections, not less. And actually, if I had my way, we'd have public financing, we'd have a much shorter time campaign season, and we'd also publicly finance advertising as well as set spending limits. And not turn campaigns, it's an industry in this country now that certainly employs thousands and thousands of people, and but it spends a lot of our time and individual money in order to get people elected.
Yes, I would echo those comments, Congresswoman. You know, members around here, some folks spend 60–70% of their time, instead of being in committee meeting, they are out making phone calls trying to raise money for the next election. It doesn't augur well for the country's future for us to have you know, this kind of leadership. In other words, leadership that depends on others to make the decision. They come in, vote on it, and then go back to the phones, making calls.
Right. I have been so fortunate because I represent a district that I fit. You know, I'm retiring, but I have represented this district for 20 years that I have fit so well that I have not had to raise millions of dollars. But I've watched my colleagues who are in these districts that could go either way, and where they're now, Citizens United has brought this super PAC money in against them, and I don't know how they do it. I mean, what a way to ruin our democracy than to have the people you elect to represent you spend so much of your time raising money instead of raising consciousness, instead of raising issues, instead of fighting for what we know needs to be done in this country. Well, and you know, this corrupt campaign finance system we have with the special interest money is going to actually corrode our democracy. And if we don't step up to it on both sides of the aisle, everybody's going to be affected by it, not just Democrats.
Well, I'm going to tell you, Congresswoman Woolsey, that's why I'm going to hate to see you leave. And I know you've been here for 20 years. Mm-hmm. That's a long time to be anywhere. And you have certainly been an unrelenting spokesperson for equity and fairness for all. And you've been a voice for peace. And you have been a voice for telling the truth. And you are indeed a rare breed in Congress, and I'm personally going to miss you, and I know many others will too. But I'll tell you, Congresswoman, there are people on the other side of the aisle, and some I know feel the same way that we do. They don't like the way or the route that our country is going. We've even had some good people over there who have already been defeated for re-election based on that special interest money coming in at the last minute, shaking things up and telling a bunch of lies, and then the public votes a good representative out. And so I think people on both sides of the aisle are being hurt by what's happening in America right now. And I'm hopeful that this next election we'll see the kind of change that needs to come here. We need to take care of the people's business. This is their Congress. This is not the corporation's Congress. We should be of, by, and for the people, not of, by, and for the corporate special interest. And, you know, I'm afraid that's where we are now. I myself have been fortunate so far to to be in sync with the people of my district, and so consequently I've not been forced to go out there and raise $1 billion, but I still have to raise money, and I would prefer a system where I could just be a legislator and we could have fairness in our elections. Everyone starting with the same amount of money to spend, and that way it's not the money, it's your message that counts. It's your
right. And if everybody has a certain amount of time on air, they can spend it putting down their opponent, or they can spend that time letting their constituents know who they are. And if they want to be negative, they can do it the way they want to. But they'll probably find out it's much more wholesome, and people will like them a lot better when they know them for who they are, not as put-down artists. So, you know, when you say that there's folks on the other side of the aisle, and I'm sure there are, I think that it's our job now to pull together a core here in the Congress who are willing to limit the influence of contributors and who are willing to curb the power of political action committees and impose spending limits and not let corporate America have a bigger voice than the average voter. And somehow or another, I think it's going to be possible, but it's going to take leaders like yourself, Hank, to make that happen. So I'll be cheering for you.
I believe you are right about that. And I will say, though, that those moderates on the other side of the aisle who I'm referring to are the prime targets of the interests that want to get rid of them and go to an extreme. And so folks over here on the Republican side of the aisle are forced to comply with the party line, or else you know, they'll suffer the consequences. And even when they follow the party line, they think, okay, well, we don't trust this person over here because there's some new blood over here that talks much more extremely. Well, and so we're going to get rid of that person here and put this new person in.
If we eliminate special interest money, if we have the Declaration of Democracy and have a constitutional change to the United States Constitution regarding this Citizens United action of the Supreme Court, I think we can help turn that around.
Well, you know, Congresswoman, you lead into the Declaration of Democracy, which I had the pleasure to sign yesterday, and along with many other of my colleagues, and I'm sure that more, the longer that this is around, the more that people will sign up. Have you had an opportunity to sign?
I signed the little card. I haven't signed that one, but I'm looking, why aren't I on there? I mean, that's how much I support it.
Yeah, well...
Actually, Leader Pelosi has signed the Declaration. It's very well received in Congress.
I'm going to read it. It's the Declaration for Democracy. And it reads as follows: I declare my support for amending the Constitution of the United States to restore the rights of the American people undermined by Citizens United and related cases, to protect the integrity of our elections and limit the corrosive influence of money in our democratic process. And so anytime we start talking about putting limits on any activity and creating more fairness, then we get labeled as socialists and communists. And that's just, we're just people that care, and I don't care what you call us. We are in support of this Declaration for Democracy, which would put the reins of government back into the hands of working people, poor people, everyone. Even the corporations would have a seat at the table, but they would not speak any louder than you or I. And I think it's very important. So I was proud to sign the Declaration of Democracy. And, you know, we're in a climate where we have a organization that is set up to connect the corporate influence, the corporate money, the special interests. We have an organization that is set up to pair those special interests, corporations, with legislators from the various state legislatures of the nation. About 60% of the legislators in the United States, the state legislators, have joined this organization. It's called the it's called ALEC.
Oh, I don't know.
And ALEC is a organization. I think it's the American Legislative Exchange Council. And what ALEC does is it's funded, of course, by business interests, billionaires and millionaires and companies. And what it does is it invites the legislators to join. It really entices them to join by offering them for a mere $50 a year. And the taxpayers, of course, pay that as a professional fee or professional cost. And so the legislator joins. Then he or she gets to go off on these 2- and 3-day weekends at some location like Hilton Head or Jekyll Island or Martha's Vineyard, wherever they go, Los Angeles, Las Vegas, wherever they can be alone and with some anonymity and in a luxurious setting. So these legislators who join go to these locations for the retreats. The business interests are there because they're underwriting it. And then they get together in committees, and the committees work out various model laws that are produced before the folks even get there. They're told about these model laws in the committees that they work on, the committees being the legislators and the business interests, and the public's interest is not there. It's all done in secret. And so the result is that the legislators come home and they have legislation which they can claim as, this is my legislation and I'm introducing it, and by the way, this is my 80th piece of legislation that I have introduced and it has passed, and I'm a busy substantive legislator. And you know, so it makes them look good out there on the campaign trail. Nobody knows what the substance of that legislation is and what it actually does and how much it costs. And then for introducing that legislation, the legislator is rewarded with a campaign contribution also from the same corporations. And so, and there and individuals associated with those corporations. And so, based on that formula right there, you've got business being done behind closed doors to benefit folks other than the people who elect these legislators. And then you never know who those legislators are because that's private information. They keep it private. And but if you're a member, you can log into the website and then go to a page and find out who all of the corporate and who all of the legislative members are members. And but you can only get access to that if you're a member, and to become a member, you have to be pre-screened in advance to make sure that you are like-minded. And if you can pass that muster, then they will let you in. And so this is the same organization that announced yesterday that they would not be involving themselves. They're disbanding their committee that had to do with social issues, as they call them, including voting rights. And so the Trayvon Martin killing, the shooting and killing of Trayvon Martin, and then the claim of self-defense, stand your ground, but really shoot to kill legislation. That legislation was produced by an ALEC committee. I'm glad to know that committee will no longer be in action, but the damage has already been done. And as a result of that, you've had some corporations that have decided that, well, this is not, we didn't buy into this. We didn't buy into this social thing. We just joined ALEC because we wanted to deal on the committees that deal with our issues, taxation, you know, whatever, FDA. We wanted to deal on those things, but instead ALEC has they've gone to an extreme. And so now we have corporations who threatened with boycotts of their goods and services are now jumping off of the ALEC bandwagon, and that causes ALEC to then announce yesterday that we're not going to deal in any more social issues. So I think that is instructive of the power of the people. If the people only know what's happening, the people will come together despite the differences that we have. We can look at each other and say, okay, well, you are older than I am, plus you are a white woman, and so therefore we don't have anything in common. Right. Or I could say that, look, you know, this person over here doesn't have the same sexual orientation as I think they should, and so therefore I'm going to condemn them to purgatory just on that basis alone. Mm-hmm. Or we can look at somebody and say, well, they got a hoodie on. He's wearing a hoodie. It's a black guy in a neighborhood. He can be 9 years old, he can be 15, or he can be 17, but he's still threatening me just by his mere presence. We size people up like that, but when we really get down to it, our interests are the same, and if we can get past the fear that we have of each other and the misunderstanding that we have about each other, we can come together and we can reclaim this country so that it will be a government run by, of, and for the people. And so that is my goal, is to continue to work towards that if my citizens think that I'm worthy of continuing to do that. And so I don't know if you have anything else you would like to add, Congresswoman? Okay, well, with that, then, I will yield the balance of my time. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Under the Speaker's announced policy of January the 5th, 2011, the gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. Jones, is recognized.